Good morning and welcome to this webcast from Wave Energy Scotland. Today we're discussing the current competitive call from WES, which is for novel wave energy converter device concepts. So had to make sure I got that absolutely right. We'll be looking at what's expected in terms of the process and taking you through some of the details today. I'm Ian Forsyth and with me today is Tim Hurst, who is the Managing Director of Wave Energy Scotland, and Andrew Lever, who's Director of Innovation at the Carbon Trust. And Tim and Andrew will be answering your questions and adding a little bit to some of the films that we're going to see over the next 45 minutes. One thing that's very important is that the process does require you to submit questions via PCS, but there is also an opportunity today to ask questions direct to Tim and Andrew. So please do feel free, in fact we would more than feel free, actively encourage you to submit your questions as we progress through the morning. It's very simple to do. If you haven't done it before, on the right hand side of the window that we're appearing in at the moment, you'll see a discussion box. All you have to do is type in your question in the little box at the bottom, hit enter, and the questions will come through to us. So please do feel free to ask your questions today. I'll recap again on when, if you have other questions that we haven't covered or that you think of subsequently, I'll recap at the end about how to make sure you get those questions asked as the process progresses. Apart from Tim and Andrew, however, we also have some pieces that were recorded by Rona Campbell of WES, and she's going to be taking us through some of the finer detail in terms of the process and this current call for converters. So let's go over to Rona now and hear a little bit of background from her on Wave Energy Scotland and the current call.
Wave Energy Scotland, or WES, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and it is funded by the Scottish Government. It takes an innovative approach to supporting the commercialisation of the wave energy sector. What makes WES unique is its long-term commitment to the sector. WES is supporting the development of wave energy technologies to the point where the private sector is ready to reinvest. Wave Energy Scotland's first call technology area was for secondary energy conversion technologies, that is power take-off systems, or PTOs. The call was launched on the 19th of March and closed on the 22nd of May. Assessments are underway and contracts will be awarded by the end of July. Further subsystem competitions are planned for 2015 to 2016 and will be advertised on Public Contract Scotland at the time these competitions open. Wave Energy Scotland is a collaborative programme seeking to source and fund the development of key subsystems and components of wave energy technology, and then integrate these with the aim of achieving success for the wave energy sector. Arising from the fundamental approach illustrated in this slide, there is a strict requirement that all applicants entering the WES process are willing to adopt the same approach, and that successful applicants collaborate in the future to allow their solutions to be integrated together where practical. Wave Energy Scotland's second call is for novel wave energy converter devices, specifically focused on the prime mover and structure.
So Rona concluded there by saying that the next call will indeed be for the novel wave energy converter devices. When will that call actually be launched?
That call's been launched.
That's the call that's been launched just now. If you just take us through what stage we're at the moment.
I think what we were talking about was when the next call.
The next call, so it's the one after, yeah.
So let me just talk you through that. WES is planning 3 more calls over this financial year. The next one will be launched by September.
Right.
The subject of that call has not been decided yet, and there's a good reason for that, which I'll explain. At the moment, WES is in the process of establishing an advisory group. It's an industry advisor group with members from key stakeholders within the wave energy sector, and they're going to give advice to WES on the direction that it needs to go in. Strategic advice on what sort of technologies we should be developing, what markets we should be looking at. So they will give us key information about where we should be looking in the future, and they're going to have an influence on the future subjects of these calls. So that's the reason we haven't named the calls as yet. The other part of work that we're doing at the moment is some knowledge capture work with previous wave energy converter technology companies from Scotland. We've got several pieces of work ongoing at the moment, and the results of those will be out in time for that information to be included in the selection of the next calls. So it's not decided yet.
Right.
It will be by September, and the next call will be launched by September.
And there'll be, I think it's 3 more in total, is that correct?
3 more.
Yeah, there'll be 3 more in total. The follow-ons will likely to be, again, a subsystem on a subsystem topic, so similar to the first PTO call. And as Tim mentioned, the advisory group are a key input into deciding what specifically that next topic will be. And I think the thing to say is that once that decision's been taken and made, then of course that will be notified through the Wave Energy Scotland website, and there'll be some comms going out in that, so people will be aware and give some pre-advance notice of what that next topic will be.
Okay, so it's a watch this space then in terms of where we go next. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I think we should go back to Rona's next piece, where she's going to talk about the process that's involved in relation to this current call about the converters. So let's hear from Rona now on the process.
The novel wave energy converter concept process comprises of 3 stages, and this call is for stage 1 entry only. Applications are not being accepted for entry into stage 2 or stage 3 of this competitive process. At the completion of stage 1, the supported device developers will be considered for progress to stage 2 through a closed competitive process with other stage 1 developers. In particular, focus will be given to the performance of the concept in stage 1 against the target outcomes, as well as the expected long-term impact in the sector. Prior to each of the subsequent stages, the competition process and assessment criteria will be defined for applicants wishing to move from stage 1 to stage 2 and stage 2 to stage 3. The technology development pathway from stage 1 to stage 3, which WES intends to support, shows the expected test scale and typical development activities for each stage, as well as mapping this onto technology readiness levels, also known as TRLs. In the case of this novel WEC competition, development starts at stage 1, which can be compared to TRL3 level activity. WES doesn't deem it to be appropriate at this time to fund the prior concept creation and feasibility development, as this is more appropriately undertaken in other settings with other sponsors such as academic institutions or with other funding which is available. Therefore, concepts applying to the process should be able to provide evidence of their scientific, technical and engineering credibility gained from these prior activities. Projects that complete stage 1 will be considered for entry into stage 2 through a closed competition, with the projects assessed on their performance at stage 1 and future prospects. This slide further illustrates the progress of supported projects through the closed competition process. WES does not intend to fund concepts at the concept creation and feasibility stage or large-scale prototype stage through this competition process. However, as the WES programme develops, WES may undertake a further open competition, namely a new procurement exercise, related to the WEC Prime Mover.
So we heard there that only stage 1 activity is being supported by WES at this stage. Why is that?
I think, basically the topic of this call is to focus on what is truly novel in terms of devices. So we are looking for effectively those concepts that provide a step change and something different to the devices which have been developed so far. So we're keen to kind of focus on what is new and what will provide that step change. Now we will look at consider devices which have maybe progressed in the past to an extent, and where that particular developer has seen that they have new ideas or amendments, if you like, to that existing device that would benefit from coming back to an early stage of development testing, then we're open to also considering those types of applications. And thinking more broadly around the kind of WES approach, as we've seen from Rona, this is very much breaking the challenge of creating a wave energy system from component parts and the right device. So we're very keen that as this competition progresses, that we'll see greater integration and development between subsystems and novel device aspects. So we're really kind of bringing things back to the start,
right,
and looking for that step change in what is truly novel, and supporting that through to hopefully a successful device.
So just to be absolutely clear though, if someone has actually already developed a small scale prototype, can they still apply for this call?
Yes, absolutely they can. If they've completed any of the activities that we've specified for stage 1, they can still apply. They can apply for the parts that they haven't done, and can apply for a proportion of the £300,000 funding. And I think it's quite important to say at this point, if you have an aspiration to go through to stage 2 or stage 3, you do need to apply now. So even if you've done everything in stage 1, but you haven't done the verification of your concept engineering or the performance test, still apply with for a proportion of the stage, with a proportion of the funding, and then that will allow you to be considered through the closed competition that Rona mentioned to move through into stage 2 and stage 3. So absolutely, if you've done any degree of this work already, you can still apply.
Okay, that's great. So we're going to go back to Rona again, but just to reiterate, if you have questions, we'll be dealing with them at the end of the session. So we've seen a few coming through already. That's good to have. Please, any questions on anything that Tim or Andrew have said, or anything that's popped into your head as we're talking here, or indeed that you've planned in advance, make sure you get those through to us. We're now going to go back to Rona this time to look at the objectives of the call and also what the planned outcomes are. So let's hear from Rona again.
Applications should clearly differentiate between the long-term impact that their project will have on the levelised cost of energy for wave energy and the target outcomes they propose to deliver in this programme stage. For the long-term impact of the LCOE on commercialisation, applications should provide a narrative of what their technology could reasonably be expected to deliver, which will be tested via modelling during the project. For target outcomes, the applicant should provide a detailed narrative of what their technology could reasonably be expected to deliver in terms of performance, which will be validated through the performance testing activities. The other high-level target outcomes of availability, survivability, affordability, and associated subheadings will also have to be considered as part of the concept engineering activities. Within their application, applicants should be able to communicate a compelling and convincing set of target outcomes, which they believe their concept can achieve, and these will be assessed by WES. Additional techno-economic metrics will be determined by awardees at the conclusion of Stage 1 to assess the attractiveness of the concept, and may include the following example metrics shown here. A guidance note, including a set of standard values, will be provided by WES to ensure these calculations are carried out to a common standard. Applicants should include the following list of typical Stage 1 activities in their submissions. If some of these activities have already been completed, applicants should state which and provide evidence of completion. WES recognises that not all these activities will be applicable to all technologies, so applicants should develop a coherent work plan based on those that are most pertinent to their technology. This is what an indicative project schedule should look like. The main activities fall into two key work streams: performance testing and concept engineering. Firstly, performance testing. Tank testing will be a key part of this stage to provide valuable information on body motions, mooring loads, structural loads, and hydrodynamic power capture efficiencies of the prime mover. Starting from a simple wave through to long crested waves and then a representative sea state, numerical models must be validated against the physical results obtained during tank testing in order to have confidence in the numerical model prediction and performance. Applicants should define a test regime suitable to their stage of development and the particular key considerations associated with their concept. However, all must include a final mandatory performance test, unless equivalent high-quality tests have been undertaken previously with third-party review. WES stipulates that applicants must adopt the Equimar protocols to develop an appropriate experiment. Where applicants do not have in-house expertise in tank testing, they should engage with one of the tank providers or other third-party experts to support this activity. Once the numerical model has been successfully validated, it can be used to characterise and predict device performance over spectra that represent a more realistic sea state based on physical measurements, such as those identified by WES at Billiacrew in Orkney or other commercial project locations. Now to concept engineering. Initial concept engineering is required to complement the performance testing undertaken to ensure the concept is buildable and operable and can address the various engineering challenges intrinsic to wave energy. The initial concept engineering review will take into account a number of key considerations, and as appropriate to this stage of development, these may be given a high-level scrutiny. As a result of the interactions with the performance testing workstream, the initial concept engineering is expected to happen predominantly towards the end of the project. Applicants should devise their own project plan to best manage the completion of objectives within the project timeframe. Applicants are free to engage their own third-party engineering input if they have identified skills or competency gaps which need to be addressed. Such costs may be included in the proposal. The completion of the initial concept engineering activities is expected to yield a number of outputs and learnings that will help validate the claimed target outcomes which the applicant seeks to demonstrate during Stage 1. A series of one-day workshops will be hosted by WES. Attendance at these and participation is a requirement with at least one representative of each team required. These workshops will assist developers in the delivery of their projects and be an effective way for developers to share non-commercially sensitive information to the benefit of all those involved in the process. In addition to the normal project reporting requirements, there will be 2 key review meetings at which the applicant will present their progress and results to WES. The dates of these workshops and review meetings will be specified once the awards have been made.
So we heard there about performance testing activity. When will we have details of the mandatory performance test?
So we expect, we're working on those at the moment, and those will be provided in terms of details of the testing campaign. We're expecting people to follow in time for the brokerage event, which will be on the 2nd of July. I would encourage applicants, there is quite a lot of information in the guidance document, however, that does set out a suggested and clear series of activities on tank testing. So they can read that in the meantime and take guidance from that, because it's likely that that's the regime that will be followed. So I would say 2nd of July is when the more information will come out on the testing regime, but there is sufficient information in the call documents already that people can look and read through to help start to develop their own testing regime. Okay, and if people are wondering about how to go about costing that, what would your advice be? So I think we've of course listed out a number of tank test providers, and in the call document there is a suggested kind of plan over the type of activities that we would expect to be undertaken. So I would suggest that people look through that, start those discussions with the tank providers, and that should give them a good basis on which to start to cost up their proposal. Okay, I think that list is Scottish test centres that are being used. What is it? Just Scottish centres? Why is that?
Yes, for this stage we've specified that we need to test in Scotland. The main reason for that is because the WES engineering team that will manage the programme needs access to the testing, not only to confirm performance but for all verification processes. There's going to be a significant number of projects, but we estimate around 8 as a minimum. So that's quite a workload for the team. So they need to be able to get to these tank test facilities easily. So we specified Scotland only. And we've done that as well because we think there are sufficient tank test facilities available. So there isn't a position where you can't get tank time or you can't find the right tank. There is a range of facilities available within Scotland, and we've specified 6 of those within the call. So there's plenty of capability, and it will give us the opportunity to manage the process a lot easier. In addition, if we are going to carry out a closed competition at the end of this, then we would like to see standard conditions. So if people are with the same device families are tested in the same tank, it makes it a more fair and open competition, comparing like with like. So it makes it a much more fairer competition as a result.
Okay, so the option to test outside Scotland is not there then?
Not for stage 1, no.
Okay, that's great. If someone's got a unique design and they don't want to share the IP at the workshops, is that a mandatory requirement?
So it's a mandatory requirement to attend the workshops, but it's not a mandatory requirement to share IP at those workshops. So just to be clear, I mean, the purpose of those workshops, they're basically there to support and focus more on the process and alignment around the testing regime and the activities that we'd be expecting people to undertake, as opposed to asking people any detail on their, what would be deemed commercially sensitive or indeed start to kind of share IP. That's not the intent. So the intent is more to focus in on the process. As Tim said, we're keen to very much adopt a standardised approach to this whole testing phase. That will help us, look at the relative merits of different applicants. And this workshop is really then just for the benefit of everyone, such that we can talk through the activities and the analysis and the testing regime, so that everyone is working together on a fair basis.
Okay, so in terms of a kind of full set of terms and conditions, when will those be available?
Okay, we've summarised the terms and conditions within the call guidance document. Table 9 gives you a summary of those. The full set of terms and conditions in the form of a draft contract will be available by the brokerage event, which is on the 2nd of July, and it will be posted on PCS.
Okay.
So what you've got at the moment is guidance. It gives you a rough idea, but the full detail, you need to read the full detail, and that will be on PCS by the 2nd of July.
2nd of July. So that seems to be the date for all the information to be
Everything
available.
comes together on the 2nd of July.
2nd of July. So that's a date for people's diaries, inevitably.
Yeah.
Let's move to the last piece from Rona, but before we do that, just a little reminder, if you haven't got your questions in by this stage, we're getting very close to the point where we might not be able to cover everything that comes through because there are a number stacking up ready to go. So please, if you do have any questions from what Tim and Andrew have been discussing, make sure you get them through in the next couple of minutes. In the meantime, let's go over and hear from Rona again, this time to just take a look at how you actually apply and, of course, the key dates. Rona's going to explain all of that to us in the next segment.
These are the key dates for this current call. Please take a careful note of them. This novel WEC call will close at 1200 hours on the 13th of August 2015. Submissions should be made using the Public Contract Scotland postbox facility only. Hard copies will not be accepted. Remember, you must be registered on PCS in order to access the call documents and complete the application process. Applicants should carefully review the supplier guides, especially the postbox supplier user guide. The guidance documents provide information to the users of the PCS system, and in particular, please pay attention to the instructions for the uploading and application submission process. Applicants should note that as part of the evaluation process, they may be required to clarify aspects of their proposal and answer questions. Applicants must therefore ensure they are available on the dates indicated if required. It is very important that you follow the procedures on Public Contracts Scotland. Applicants must use PCS for all questions regarding this call only and not generic inquiries about WES. Applicants must ensure they know how to use PCS. User guides are available and applicants can contact PCS directly. Please make sure you return all the documents required and do not send in extra materials not requested. Please use the checklist. Also note page limit restrictions and particularly note deadlines, as late applications will not be accepted. The system won't allow submissions to be dispatched after the deadline, even if uploaded before this.
So just a question about the application form here, in terms of will people be able to submit diagrams and sketches as part of that process?
Yes, of course. So we understand, certainly at this stage, a picture can tell 1,000 words in many respects, and so we've amended the application form such that people can append documents that do provide that. The only thing I would say is that just be aware of the page limits and the size of document files. Again, that information is in the application form. But yes, people will be able to submit sketches and drawings that help and support their application.
Can I just say about page limits? If you do go over the page limits, then everything beyond the page limit will have to be ignored. So if you ignore the rules, you'll find that part of your application isn't assessed. So it's very important, stick to the page limits.
Okay, that's a good point. You don't want your important stuff to be missed out completely. Yeah. Travel and expenses, just going back to the test facility, will they be paid for trips to the test facilities in Scotland for people?
Yeah, absolutely. All the costs pertaining to travel and including all the testing is included and as eligible costs within the call. So all costs to do with testing, including travel, absolutely covered.
Okay, great. Well, I think we'll be promising people that we'll go over and start to deal with their questions. We'll finish the segments from Rona. So let's start to look at the build-up of questions that we have here. The first one is from Jose, based in Portugal, and he's asking, is it possible for a Portuguese company to submit to the WES call for converter devices?
Yes, absolutely. The call is open to basically the European Union. Well, it's actually, and let's get this right, the European Free Trade Association countries. So that's all the current member states of the EU, plus plus Switzerland, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway.
Okay.
So if you're in the EU, and Portugal was the last time I checked, you're absolutely fine.
Okay. We've had one that's kind of related to that from Stuart, who is based in the UK. Besides the requirement to perform tank tests in Scotland, are there any other requirements on the Scottishness of applicants and their proposed projects?
No, there isn't. It's the testing needs to take place in Scotland. The rest of the project, the majority must take place within Europe. So if you're an overseas company outside of Europe and you've got a subsidiary within Europe, the majority of the work must take place within the European Free Trade Association countries.
Okay.
And all of the testing within Scotland.
Okay. Which is quite neat, because our next question is from Franklin, who's based in America, and he's asking if tank testing, is tank testing an absolute requirement, and if not, when can we get it in the water?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been pretty clear around the fact that we're very keen to, understand the potential performance from devices at an early stage. The target outcomes and the outputs, we're focusing on performance, we're focusing on the ability of that device to get to the 150 pounds per megawatt hour at scale and commercialisation level. So this is really about building up that a robust case and evidence base for people to build the confidence up, and we believe that we'd much prefer that is done at a tank testing and concept engineering phase to build that through, and therefore that's the approach that we're taking. So the question, of course, and the applicant, of course, can put an application. We'll be looking for the evidence base and the verification of testing done, because that's a core part of this particular stage. Okay. And that's gets into the competition at an early stage, and then it's closed through to the development of that device as it steps through and increases in its scale. So that's the approach that WES has taken to build up from a small scale, and that's the one which we hopefully will get to. But that's the approach that we've decided upon.
Okay, great. Connor, who's in Ireland, is asking this time about really a question about scale. Could you clarify what is meant by large-scale prototype development? Where's the cut-off between small and large, and is it over a certain scale? So it's about scale here for Connor.
Large scale, we haven't defined within the core document, and certainly that's not what this stage 1 is about. So we're not looking for a large-scale prototype. We're looking for probably something like 50th to 20th scale, that sort of scale, within the test that we're looking at. So it's not large-scale within stage 1.
Okay. Elaine, who's in Orkney, has said that the call text state that survivability testing is not expected at this stage. Can you please confirm if survivability testing is required?
I think, this is a good question. I think at this stage there's a limitation as to what can be achieved at this small scale with an attack testing regime. So, we are looking for the core elements of efficiency, performance, affordability, and to an extent survivability, of course, are those core aspects that we're looking for. But we are cognizant of the fact that there's only so much you can test to destruction within that scale. Yeah. So what I would advise is that there's a narrative and a description within the application, and of course it's covered within the concept engineering phase. But that should be at a high level, and latter stages of this competition will therefore then look in more detail at those survivability aspects.
Okay. Apologies in advance. I think it's Ambroise, if I get your name wrong, who's based in the Netherlands and in France, and is asking what is the time frame for stages 2 and 3, and what's the expected funding for these stages? So I know we're focusing on stage 1 just now, but this question really is what's your anticipation for the next couple of stages?
We haven't published any figures for that, and it's still an estimate, but we are envisaging stage 2 and stage 3 taking about 18 months each, roughly. We will get more detail onto the website as soon as we can on that. And the budget, if you like, for those really depends on how many come through the competition from stage 1.
Okay.
So we're not going to publish that at this stage either.
Okay.
But the available funds per individual to go through each of those stages will become available as we get more detail on those particular competitions.
Okay, so it's not a fixed amount?
It's not fixed, no. And it's very much dependent on the quality that comes out of stage 1, quantity and quality that come out of stage 1.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Max Carcass has asked, is it necessary to have third-party verification, and if so, who is an acceptable third party? So
I think the guidance document does lead you into, for example, in the testing regime, the test facility themselves would be deemed to be an appropriate third-party verifier on that side. On the engineering side, then we'd be looking for a suitably qualified individual. That might be a potential consultancy or technical consultancy, perhaps, that people. This is really to fill in and give confidence that the engineering is to a suitable standard. So, that's the kind of test, I guess, that we would be putting on from a reviewing perspective. That those people and those verifiers are suitably qualified. So, on the tank testing side, the facilities themselves would have that kind of credence and verification. On the concept engineering side, then we would be looking for a kind of typical kind of maybe technical consultancy who'd have the appropriate skill sets to provide that verification.
Okay. This next one's around universities, and it's from Maggie, who's based in Leicester. And her question, very simple: can a university submit a proposal as a sole applicant?
Yes, they can. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
There's no difference from our perspective as to whether you're a university or you're a private sector. There's no problem with that, and they can do it as a single organisation, but they have to be able to demonstrate all the range of skills required and all the criteria that are set down in the guidance document. So if they can do that, then absolutely.
Okay, so it's more about the criteria than the organisation. If you meet the criteria,
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
the important part.
Yeah.
Okay. Cameron, who's based in the UK, says, his partner and I have a concept, but we do not have a company yet. When we submit our proposal to WES, our company will not have traded. Will the fact that our company is brand new hurt our proposal?
I don't think so, but I would need to clarify that. What we have said is that there is a document that requires you to put in various bits of information about your financial background and your status. So provided that you can answer all of those questions, and I believe they're pass-fail questions, provided you can meet the financial requirements laid down, then the fact that you're a relatively new company isn't a problem. But we'd ask them to put that in through PCS, and we can give you a full breakdown of that.
Okay, so Cameron, the request there, make sure you put that question in again through PCS to get a definitive answer is essentially the answer there, just to make absolutely sure that we've got that correct. Arthur, who's based in Poland, is asking, is there any focus on the type of equipment? Is WES considering floating facilities or shore-based too? So is there a preference?
There is no preference. This is an open competition on a number of different type of device families and types. So there's no particular preference, or there will be no particular selection that's based upon any particular device itself. So the competition is open.
Okay.
It's obviously wave devices, but within that, there's a number of different approaches to that, and we're open to all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do want to encourage novel devices. So you know, who's to say we know what all the concepts are? There might be concepts that we haven't even thought about. So we've left it as open as possible. If you've got an innovative idea, put it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no preference.
No preference whatsoever.
Okay.
It's all about performance. Yeah.
Simon from Inverness has asked, is WES interested in technologies designed for export to niche, albeit very large markets where 150 megawatt hours is not the relevant benchmark?
Yeah, I think this question came up in the PTO call as well. We are. If Simon can identify that that the size of that economic prize is significant and there is a significant market behind it, then I think that's something that needs to be set out and defined in terms of the evidence base that he would put forward in his application. I mean, the reason that we've selected £150 kind of a megawatt hour is that because we feel it's a level that at a mass market and even global scale that wave technology has to achieve. That's an answer in itself, in that if it's a niche market that has the potential to grow into a larger market, then that should be part of Simon's narrative. But we have to remember that there's the overall idea of the Wave Energy Scotland and its objectives is to make this economic potential as large as possible. Okay. So we're really looking for, with all the subsystem calls, with this novel call, creating that final picture, which will get us to a big number on a global basis.
Right. This next question from Mike is about working capital. I want to make sure I read it word for word, just in case I end up misleading you, so bear with me here. As a startup company, specifically for exploiting our WEC, we don't have what you'd call working capital as such. What is the timing over funding being distributed? And presuming that most of the money at least will be retrospective, will at least some of the money be available upfront as working capital?
I think that's yet to be defined. We would develop a project plan with each of the successful applicants, from where we would define technical milestones and payment milestones. So for each project, that would be worked out individually. We are very aware that for small technology companies, where the majority of their work is based on the project with WES, that those might have to be quite short periods. And we would try and make it as favourable as possible. But in terms of providing working capital, that's not something that WES would be particularly interested in doing. If you are within Scotland and you are developing a new company, there are enterprise agencies that would help you with that kind of thing. So this is about the technology and about the project, not necessarily about the company that sits behind it. But certainly, we would not be, waiting 12 months before we paid you. We would arrange suitable payment schedules within the project period.
Okay. And people would be clear about that from the outset.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Simone, who's based in Spain, is asking whether there's any limit on subcontracting work outside the company. So I presume bringing people in from outside to work on the project?
There's no limit on subcontracts as part of it, but if that subcontract was with a company that was outside the European Free Trade Association area and it represented a significant amount of the work, then that would be a problem.
Okay.
The majority of the work needs to happen in Europe.
Okay.
You can't subcontract 80% of the work outside. That would not be acceptable.
Okay. That kind of connects quite nicely with the last question we have here from Ford, who's based in America. Can non-EU entities partner with EU entities to meet call requirements?
I think the answer is the same.
Yeah.
I think the majority of the work has to be carried out within the European Free Trade Association area.
Okay.
So if they're thinking that they can partner and carry out most of the work in the US, that's not acceptable.
Right. It has to be carried out.
It has to be carried out.
EU.
The majority of the work has to be carried out in the European Free Trade area.
Okay, that's fine. Well, thanks very much. I think we've managed to get through all of the audience questions, but as ever, if you do have more questions that you want to ask, the route for doing that is through Public Contracts Scotland, and that's where all questions need to go, and they will be answered in due course, and the answers published for all bidders to see. So it remains for me to say thank you to Tim and to Andrew for their time today and for answering those questions. Also, just to recap on some of the key milestones in terms of the process, we've talked about the brokerage event a fair bit today. That's on the 2nd of July. The last date to request clarification is on the 30th of July. And the other two dates that I think are important for your diary is the tender deadline, which is the 13th of August, and the contract awards, which will be by the 21st of October. So those are the key dates. All of that was covered in Rona's pre-record, and it's worth mentioning that there will be a watch again of this whole webcast on the WES website very soon. So if there are bits that you want to replay and watch again, please feel free to do so. It's simply a case of clicking onto the WES website to find that and watch through it. Just finally, again, just to reiterate a couple of things that Rona said, questions through PCS must be specifically about this call, not about general questions in relation to WES. So it's specifically about the call for novel converters, not about WES. And it's also important to say, remember, as we've said several times, the brokerage event, which is on the 2nd of July, when a lot of the additional information that you will need in order to be able to make progress with your bids will be made available. So thank you very much for joining us today. I hope that we've answered your questions and given you all the information that you need. But do remember, PCS is there for you to ask additional questions over the coming weeks. And thank you again for joining us.